They read my husband's will from a glass wall, not paper, not envelopes. A pane of smart glass in our seaside conference room flickered awake like a storm breaking, and Adrian's voice, warmer than I was ready for, filled the room we'd built together. It was the third day after the funeral. The lilies were still sweet enough to make my eyes burn. "For my daughter, Celeste Reyes," the hologram said, "I leave executive control of Ray Tech Aqua and all public holdings attached to it. For my wife, Liora, a passage to Monaco departing tomorrow. A passage. One sentence for 43 years of love and early mornings and hard math and dirty pumps and clean water." Across the glass table, my daughter didn't look at me. She angled her chin toward the window, where the Mediterranean cut a blue vein through noon light and smoothed an invisible crease from her blazer. The tiny muscles near her mouth gave her away, relief masquerading as serenity. The lawyer, Adrian, adjusted his cuff and kept going. Asset registries, transition protocols, phrases that sounded like elevators falling down a shaft. I heard every word and none of them. I was busy pressing my wedding band into the soft heel of my palm, feeling a half-moon dent my skin, reminding myself I was still here, still solid, still Liora. People think grief is a river. It isn't. It's a room with no oxygen. You don't drown, you burn. When the hologram dimmed, the room forgot how to blink. No one moved until the glass returned to its shimmery, meaningless reflection, and I could see the three of us inside it. Adrian just out of law school forever, my daughter sharp as a new knife, and me in a black dress that used to fit another woman's life. "Mother," Celeste said finally, the word polished like an object she didn't want to buy. "We'll take care of logistics. Your cruise leaves at 10. I'll have Lucia pack you a capsule wardrobe." A capsule wardrobe. For the widow, for the woman who once mapped underground aquifers by touch because the instrument batteries died and there wasn't time to go back. I smiled the way people smile when a blood draw misses the vein. "Adrian always loved Monaco," I said, though we'd never been. "He used to circle pictures in magazines, yachts like teeth glinting. We would point and invent stories for strangers. The novelist with a dog, the chemist in 2 white sneakers, the couple that married too late and refused to be punished for it. Daddy wanted what was best for the company," Celeste replied. "You know how he was with optics." Optics, Celeste's favorite word. She'd come back from Harvard fluent in it. How a thing looked mattered more than what the water tasted like. I remember the first time she said it in a board meeting. "The optics of free filtration for the South District aren't great." I remember the way Adrian flinched, tiny, and how I placed a hand on his knee beneath the table and pressed. Adrian closed his tablet. "There are transition documents to sign." His voice softened in my direction. "Dr. Reyes, I can." "I'm fine," I said, which was the lie grief requires in public. He slid the glass toward me. "Sign here, here, and here." The pen felt too heavy for something that made no sound. When I stood to leave, Celeste stood too. She kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to touch the powdered places. She smelled like fig and mercury. "Text me when you board." "Of course," I said. On my way down the corridor, I passed the wall of frames we kept to embarrass ourselves. First rigs, first wellhead, our first desalination plant cutting through a silvered dawn. In one, Celeste is 6 and soaked, all the sea in her curls, holding a plastic cup of water up to the sky like it might answer her back. In another, Adrian and I are 28 and idiot bright, his hand on the small of my back as if he could keep me from falling. I did fall. In love, into the science, into the long arithmetic of a life. I found Lucia in my dressing room laying silk with the care you give to bandages. She tried to smile and failed. "Senora Liora, I'll be back in a week." I lied again because other people need soft landings when the plane is already on fire. "Could you please leave the silver locket?" the one with the dent. When I returned to the kitchen, a demolition team was on the terrace measuring my garden. The basil boxes, the pipes I'd rigged to carry fog to the orchids, everything that smelled like saved mornings. A young man with a tablet waved when he saw me, cheerful the way only people without context can be. "Sorry, ma'am, we'll be out of your hair by Monday. New layout approved." "By whom?" I asked, though the question was a child's, one of those whys that knows the answer and needs the ache of hearing it. "MS. Raise," he said, meaning my daughter. "We're taking down the south wall and opening the view. Big airy lines." Airy, I repeated and tasted salt. Inside, the house felt misbuttoned. A box sat open on the dining room table labeled archive, personal in a tidy hand that wasn't mine. My grandmother's tea bowls nested in towels like eggs. The mission bell Adrian bought in Oaxaca. The day I realized I loved him, he knocked a bell just like it with his elbow, startled the entire cafe into laughter, then bowed to the room as if the symmetry of the accident demanded reverence. We were young enough to think the world knew our names. Celeste arrived in the doorway with a clipboard and a smile that looked like a closed door. "I didn't authorize a demolition," I said quietly. She tilted her head. "You said you trusted Daddy. Trust and silence aren't the same." "Mother," she said, and the word was more distance than address, "please don't make this harder. Optics matter. Investors need to see decisive leadership." She glanced toward the garden. "And the hydroponics, it's quaint, but we're moving into a different market segment." "Water?" I asked. "We're moving into a different market of water." She sighed. "Access models, tiered pricing, strategic partnerships, you know this." I did know it. I knew every equation that could ever be made from strategic and water and profit and the way something sacred can be cut into pieces if you hold the knife right. I also knew the look of a child who no longer remembers she came from you. I almost told her I was proud of her, that she was brilliant and relentless and the exact kind of dangerous the world bows for. But something inside me, the old scientist with a headlamp and a taped boot, the woman who held her husband's hand as the monitors went flat, that woman did not let the words pass. "I'll be at the harbor at 10, I said instead. That night the house hummed wrong. Lights in hallways I didn't turn on. The echo of men laughing outside my bedroom window, measured, respectful, professional laughter. The kind that says this will all be different by sunrise. I lay on the bed we bought the week after we finally could, when the company signed its first city contract, and we ate champagne grapes with our fingers. I pressed the locket into my throat where the weight could hold me down. Around 2, I padded to the kitchen. The sea had gone black and bright at once, a trick it does when the moon is indecisive. On the counter, a single printed itinerary weighted Alcyone/Monaco, tucked into a leather folio I had never seen. My name spelled correctly, my age correct, which almost no airline ever manages. Someone had packed my traveling life into a system that anticipated my resistance. On the inside flap, a note in Etienne's handwriting. He planned this. Please go. He planned this, of course he did. Adrian wasn't a man, he was a blueprint. Every kindness he ever gave me had engineering inside it. The part of me that wanted to be furious at him for leaving me only a passage was the same part that knew. If Adrian sent me to Monaco, the truth wasn't here. I slept for an hour and dreamed about pipes. Woke to gulls auditioning for a riot. Showered. Wore a black linen suit that refused to wrinkle, the one Adrian said made me look like I could sue God and win. Lucia cried when she zipped my suitcase. I kissed her cheeks and told her to water the basil hard before the men took it. At the harbor, the Alcyone waited like a promise someone else had to keep. The deckhands moved with the quiet choreography of people who know their work matters more than conversation. I handed over my passport and my grief and stepped onto the gangway. Dr. Reyes, a man called, not quite young, not quite middle, with a face built for secrets. He held out his hand as if we'd practiced this. Felix Dubre, Adrian asked me to meet you. My bones went cold, not because of the name Felix, the former strategist I hadn't seen in years, but because of the way he said asked, present tense, tugged across a past we were supposed to accept. I don't understand, I said. You will, he answered softly. He gestured toward the salon, toward a small table set with coffee that knew the exact color I took it. There are things in Monaco that aren't in the will. Like what? I asked, my voice thinner than I wanted. Felix's gaze flicked to the locket at my throat, then back to my eyes. He chose his words as if they could bruise. Like why he left you a ticket instead of a throne. The horn sounded, low and certain. Lines fell. The city shrugged its shoulders and turned away. I found the railing with my palm and held on, the way you hold on when the earth is moving underwater, when the map you memorized is quietly, finally being replaced. I'm listening, I said, and for the first time since the glass wall spoke, oxygen slipped back into the room. The sea at dawn looks nothing like the sea at noon. At dawn, it keeps its secrets close. I stood on the deck of the Alcyone, watching Monaco rise like a fortress carved from pale stone. The air smelled of salt and diesel and money. Behind me, the engines purred, a steady animal heart beating me closer to a future I hadn't chosen. Felix Dubre leaned on the railing beside me, hands tucked in the pockets of a tailored jacket that hadn't seen a field sight in its life. His hair was grayer than I remembered, but his eyes still had that knife-sharp curiosity. Years ago, he'd been Adrian's right hand in strategy. Then, abruptly, he left the company without explanation. Now here he was, welcoming the widow like a man waiting for a signal. Adrian trusted you, I said, not quite a question, not quite a compliment. He gave a short laugh. Adrian trusted very few people. I was just lucky to be one of the pawns he told the plan to. Plan, I repeated. The word felt like walking barefoot on glass. He didn't even leave me the house, Felix. He left me a ticket. And a key, he said. He slipped his hand into his jacket and produced a slim metal capsule the size of a lipstick tube. When he unscrewed the top, a sliver of translucent biochip slid out, glowing faintly under the early sun. DNA lock, Felix explained. Only you can access what's inside. What is it? He smiled slightly, like a magician about to pull back the curtain. The reason you're here. The car ride from the harbor to the cliffside villa was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Monaco in the morning looked like a movie pretending to be real. White yachts like teeth, terraces blooming with bougainvillea, polished windows that didn't reflect people, just wealth. Felix guided me through a gate that looked like it belonged to a monastery, not a billionaire's hideaway. The villa itself wasn't large, but it was old, weathered limestone, ivy, narrow windows that watched like eyes. It felt like Adrian's taste, quiet, deliberate, never obvious. Inside, the scent of cedar and lemon oil hit me. There were no servants, no ambient music, just the sound of our shoes on marble. Felix led me down a staircase I almost didn't see. Beneath the villa was a circular chamber with glass walls and a central console that looked like it belonged in a submarine. Pipes ran through the walls like arteries. Soft blue light pulsed under the floor, synchronized to something I couldn't name. This is where he kept the real legacy, Felix said. He placed the DNA chip into a slot on the console. He called it the reservoir. The lights shifted. A hologram bloomed in the air, Adrian's face, younger than the last time I saw him alive, but with that same maddening calm. He looked directly at me as if the camera had known where I'd stand. Liora, his voice said, warm and methodical. If you're here, Celeste has revealed who she's become. I'm sorry you had to witness it, but I couldn't protect both you and the company openly, so I built a trap she couldn't resist. I pressed a hand to my chest. The room tilted, but Felix's presence beside me kept me anchored. Everything public, the shares, the board, the visible fortune, belongs to her. But everything real, Adrian continued. The technology, the sovereign trust, the controlling stake, it belongs to you. You're the only one I trust not to sell water to the highest bidder. The hologram shifted to display blueprints of Aquanet. The underground water distribution, grid Adrian, and I designed decades ago. But this wasn't the public version. This showed control nodes, 7 of them hidden across Europe, giving whoever held their keys total operational power. Without them, Celeste's empire was just glass and branding. She will move fast, Adrian's hologram warned. She's brilliant and ruthless, and she has investors who see water as the next oil. You have one advantage: she doesn't know this exists. Protect it, use it, and decide what happens to her. The hologram faded, leaving a silence that was too big for the room. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling on the console. He built an entire shadow structure without telling me. Felix crossed his arms. He was trying to protect you from the weight of it. You were always the heart. He needed to be the architect. And now I'm both, I whispered. Felix crouched beside me, lowering his voice. Celeste is already negotiating with foreign investors. She's planning to sell exclusive access to the Alpine reservoirs to a private conglomerate by the end of the quarter. Once that happens, public water rights are gone for good. I stared at the glowing map on the console, the same map Adrian and I had sketched on napkins when we were young, when the idea of giving clean water to every community wasn't a strategy, it was a promise. Celeste was about to sell that promise. No, I said quietly. Not while I'm still breathing. Felix handed me a sleek black case. Inside were 7 small vials, each with a biometric seal. These are the control keys to the nodes. Without them, the network can't be transferred, hacked, or sold. He kept them hidden, now they're yours. I touched one vial warm, almost like it was alive. My reflection stared back at me from its glass, tired, grieving, but sharpening. When do I go back? I asked. Felix's smile held no humor. If you want to stop her, you don't go back, you return. The distinction landed like a hammer. That night, in the villa Adrian built for a future I hadn't imagined, I couldn't sleep. The sea kept knocking at the cliffs, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I thought of Celeste at 6 years old, barefoot in the aquifer field, splashing through the first clean water we'd ever drawn. She'd lifted a cup toward the sun and said, "This is what hope tastes like. Where had that girl gone? Or maybe the better question, when had I stopped looking for her?" I opened the case again. 7 vials. 7 chances to keep our promise. 7 decisions I hadn't wanted to make. Somewhere in the dark, Monaco's clock chimed midnight. I whispered to the sea, to Adrian, to the woman I used to be. Okay, let's begin. They didn't see me coming. That was the first victory. For weeks, Celeste's PR team flooded the media with sleek campaigns. The next era of water, glossy drones over the Mediterranean, her face everywhere, sharp, composed, the visionary daughter. Investors called her the Iron Heiress. She loved it. She always did love being the headline. Meanwhile, I was already on French soil. Felix and I entered quietly through the Marseille port at dawn, not the family jet. Kai Montalban, my late brother's son, met us at the docks. He'd grown taller, shoulders sunburned from fieldwork, eyes too old for 28. "Aunt Liora," he whispered, pulling me into a hug that smelled like salt and metal. "You really came back." "Of course," I said. This was never hers to sell. The house had changed. Construction scaffolding climbed the south walls. Workers in neon suits moved through the garden like they owned it. The basil was gone. The orchids were shriveled in their boxes. A banner stretched across the terrace. Ray House Renaissance Project Leadership for a New Tomorrow. My daughter's signature bloomed in gold beneath it. I watched from the cliff path as a fleet of black sedans rolled up the driveway. Investors from a Middle Eastern consortium stepped out, all sunglasses and measured smiles. They were here for the sale, the deal that would privatize the Alpine reservoirs. The press would be in 2 days. She was moving fast, exactly as Adrian predicted. "Security's tight," Kai murmured. "She replaced the entire staff, cameras everywhere." "Good," I said. "Then she won't expect me to walk in through the front door." We entered through the aquifer shaft, the same underground channel I'd helped design decades ago. Back then, it was an engineering marvel. Now it was our way in. My boots hit the slick concrete steps in rhythm with my pulse. Felix followed behind with the black case, the 7 vials secured like state secrets. Kai carried the portable node activator, a modified field device that looked like a rugged briefcase. At the final steel door, I pressed my thumb against the biometric lock. It hesitated, then clicked. I smiled. Adrian had kept my codes active. He knew I'd come back. The old control room smelled like damp stone and ozone. From here, we could access the surveillance backbone Adrian installed, the quantum lens. Hidden cameras throughout the estate, including the boardroom. Kai booted the system. Screens flickered to life, showing Celeste greeting investors in the dining hall that once held our Sunday dinners. "Look at her," Felix muttered. "She's playing queen." On one screen, Celeste shook hands with the consortium leader, her smile warm but her eyes like glass. On another, she gave instructions to her COO, saying, "Once the contract's signed, we'll shut down the legacy nodes. I don't care what my mother built, we're not a charity." My fingers curled into fists. 2 hours later, the board meeting began. She'd scheduled it in the East Wing glass chamber, the place Adrian and I designed for sunlight and clarity. Now it looked like a war room dressed in silk. I watched through the quantum lens as she laid out her plan, the investors nodding like snakes basking in heat. Felix leaned toward me. "This is it. If she signs that deal, it's irreversible." "No," I said softly. "It's exactly reversible." I opened the black case, 7 vials, 7 control nodes. I inserted the first into the portable activator. A deep hum filled the room. On the surveillance feed, the lights flickered overhead in the boardroom. Celeste glanced up, irritated. "Node 1 activated," Kai whispered. "Routing secure channel." I slid in the second, then the third. With each activation, Aquanet's controls shifted, not through paperwork or courts, but through the physical infrastructure Adrian had buried beneath her polished empire. "4th node online, she won't notice until you hit 6, Felix warned. "She'll notice," I murmured. "She just won't understand." Celeste noticed at node 5. She paused mid-presentation, the screens behind her glitching into old schematics, my schematics, like ghosts rising from blueprints. Her brow furrowed. "What's happening to the feed?" she demanded. An IT aide scrambled. "Some kind of external override, but it's authenticated from a founder-level key. That's impossible." "Mother," Celeste hissed suddenly, eyes narrowing like a predator catching a scent. I stepped into the boardroom at node 6. No guards, no theatrics, just me. Black linen suit, locket at my throat, and 30 years of quiet authority walking through glass doors. The room froze. "Hello, Celeste," I said. Mother." Her voice cracked just enough to make the investors glance sideways. "I heard you're selling our water," I said calmly, like a teacher catching a student cheating mid-exam. "This is a strategic partnership," she snapped, recovering. "You have no right to." I placed the 7th vial into the activator. The entire network pulsed like a living thing, blue light washing through the glass walls. Every screen in the room switched to Adrian's recorded face, the same hologram I'd seen in Monaco. "If Celeste chooses profit over principle," Adrian's voice filled the chamber, Control reverts to Liora Kwong Gray's, effective immediately. Investors stood, phones buzzed, Celeste's perfect mask cracked like old porcelain. "No," she breathed. "No, this isn't possible." "Oh, it's very possible," I said. "Because while you were playing optics, your father was building safeguards. You can't do this. I already have." I held up the activator. "Every node, every lock, every valve, it's mine now. You're CEO of a shell, Celeste. Without the reservoirs, you own nothing but a brand and a banner." She lunged forward, slamming her palms on the table. "Why? After everything I've built." "After everything we built," I corrected sharply. "You forgot the we. You forgot that water isn't a commodity. You forgot the girl who held a cup to the sun and said, 'This is what hope tastes like.'" Her lip trembled, just once quickly, like a child slipping through armor. Then the steel returned. "You're going to ruin me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You're going to face yourself." I turned to the investors. "The deal is void. Any attempts to push it through will trigger legal countermeasures and international trust clauses you can't afford to fight. Leave." They did, quickly. When the boardroom emptied, it was just us. Mother and daughter, throne and heir, water and fire. Celeste stood by the window, shoulders shaking. "He planned this, didn't he? He planned for me to fail." "He planned to give you a choice," I said softly. "You made it." "I was protecting the company." "No, Celeste, you were protecting your ego." Silence stretched between us like a drawbridge no one wanted to lower. For the first time in years, she looked young again, tired, lost. "What happens now?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Now," I said, "you decide if you want to rebuild with me or live outside the gates you tried to lock me out of." That night, I sat alone in the garden under scaffolding and stars. The vials were secure. The investors were gone. The water was safe for now. Somewhere inside, Celeste's room light turned on. Maybe she was pacing, maybe crying, maybe plotting, or maybe, just maybe, remembering the girl with the plastic cup in the sunrise. The war wasn't over, but the board had shifted. And this time I held the map. It didn't take her long to strike back. 3 days. That's all it took for the lawyers to come knocking, sharp suits, colder eyes, carrying folders like knives wrapped in silk. They arrived while I was in the kitchen, barefoot, steeping tea in the quiet of early morning. The garden was finally breathing again. I'd ordered the scaffolding removed overnight. The house smelled like citrus and steel, like the start of something clean. Then came the knock. "Dr. Liora Kwong Gray's," the lead attorney said, his French accent lacquered with arrogance. "You've unlawfully seized corporate property and violated succession law under EU Global Commerce Code Section 47. 1. My client, MS, Celeste Reyes, is filing for emergency injunction." I stared at him over the rim of my teacup. "She's your client now," I said softly. He blinked. "Excuse me. You said my client, just making sure you're not still pretending this is about family." His mouth twitched. "We'll be in touch with your counsel." "I am the counsel," I said, "and the owner and the architect." I opened the door wider and gestured toward the terrace. "Good morning to you too." By noon, every news outlet from Paris to Singapore was running the story. Heiress sues mother over water empire coup. Monaco trust sparks legal showdown in France. The Water Queen vs. the Iron Heiress. Celeste moved quickly. She froze PR assets, launched a global smear campaign, painted herself as the betrayed visionary whose aging mother was manipulated by shadow advisors. She accused Felix of coercion. She hinted that I wasn't of sound mind. That last part, unsound mind, wasn't random. It was a dagger. Because buried in some old legal briefing Adrian once showed me, there was a clause. If the trust holder was declared mentally incompetent by a European court, control would automatically transfer to the next heir. Her. "She's going for your capacity," Felix said grimly, scanning the legal documents at the kitchen table. If she convinces the court that you're unstable, they can override the trust. She's not playing PR anymore, Liora. She's playing chess. I taught her chess, I murmured. Kai paced the room. She's weaponizing the one thing she can't beat you on, public narrative. She knows you're brilliant, so she's trying to make the world forget. She's trying to erase me, I corrected quietly. The hearing was set in Paris. A sleek international commercial tribunal, glass walls, biometric scanners, cameras everywhere. As I stepped into the courtroom, flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Headlines were already written in the eyes of the reporters. The world didn't see mother and daughter. They saw empire and succession, titan and heiress. Celeste sat on the opposite side, dressed in minimalist white, a deliberate contrast to my black linen suit. She didn't look at me at first, but when she did, it wasn't hatred I saw. It was something worse. Determination. Her legal team was ruthless. They played clips from our security footage, carefully edited, painting me as a secretive, unstable matriarch who stormed into a board meeting and seized control using unknown technology. They brought in a neurologist who had never examined me but testified about the cognitive risks of widowhood at advanced age. They even showed a decades-old interview where Adrian said I saw the world through feelings. They twisted that into emotional volatility. Every move was calculated to turn me from strategist into stereotype. And Celeste sat there like marble. When it was my turn to speak, the courtroom fell into a stillness that hummed in my bones. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I built Aquanet. I began. I mapped underground reservoirs by hand. I signed the first city contracts while pregnant with the woman sitting across from me. I held this company's secrets when there were no secrets, just water and hope. I stepped toward the tribunal panel. I didn't seize anything. I activated the protections my husband designed because he knew what happens when water becomes profit. He knew it could destroy nations the way oil once did. And he trusted me not because I'm young, not because I'm photogenic, but because I don't sell hope to the highest bidder. I turned to Celeste. I looked her right in the eyes. You're brilliant, I said. You're ruthless, and you're trying to win by erasing the woman who raised you, but you're forgetting one thing, Celeste. She blinked. What? This company runs on infrastructure, and I built the bones. The evidence followed. Felix produced the full quantum lens archive, not the edited clips her team submitted. The tribunal watched her in her own voice negotiating the Alpine deal. Water is the new gold, she said on screen, smiling, and I intend to own every drop. The room shifted. Then came Adrian's sealed letter, held back for this exact moment, in his own handwriting, dated 2 years before his death. If there's ever a dispute between Liora and Celeste, assume Liora is right. Not because she's my wife, but because she understands the difference between legacy and power. It wasn't legal evidence, but it was human, and in a courtroom filled with legal machinery, humanity lands like thunder. The tribunal's verdict came at sunset. Celeste's injunction was denied. My mental capacity challenge was dismissed with prejudice. The trust remained intact. And for the first time since the day of the will reading, I exhaled fully. But the fight wasn't over. That night, Celeste showed up at the villa. No cameras, no lawyers, just the sound of her heels on the marble and the smell of rain coming through the open doors. Congratulations, she said. Her voice was low, cracked. You won. This isn't about winning, I said. Yes, it is, she snapped. It always has been, you just like to pretend it isn't. I studied her face, the way her jaw clenched, the way exhaustion shadowed her eyes. She looked like me once, before the gardens, before the locket, before the softness we both buried. Why are you really here, Celeste? She hesitated. Because I don't know how to be your enemy and your daughter. The silence between us was no longer a wall, it was a question. I stepped closer. Then stop choosing one over the other. I don't know if forgiveness will come. I don't know if legacy can be rebuilt without breaking more first. But as the storm rolled in off the sea, she didn't leave. And I didn't ask her to. Maybe this isn't the end of a war. Maybe it's the beginning of a reckoning. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. I woke before dawn. The storm from the night before had washed Monaco's sky clean. The garden shimmered under the first light, every leaf strung with droplets like jewelry. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like the air was being measured for someone else's profit. Celeste was still here. She'd fallen asleep in the study, Adrian's old chair, knees tucked to her chest, hair undone. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was 13 and had gotten lost in the marshlands during one of our early mapping expeditions. I'd found her then by following her humming. She hummed when she was scared. She was humming now. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. This woman, this storm I'd raised and fought, was still my daughter. And for the first time in a very long time, she looked like someone who might finally stop fighting me long enough to listen. By mid-morning, we were at the kitchen table, no lawyers, no cameras, no armor. She wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee like it might keep her anchored. I didn't expect to lose, she said quietly. You didn't lose, I replied. You got stopped. There's a difference. She flinched a little. It felt like losing. That's because you've built your entire life on winning, I said. Not building, not holding, winning, that's not legacy, Celeste, that's war. She stared into the steam. I thought if I didn't take control, someone else would. I thought you'd disappear after Dad died. I thought you were done fighting. I almost was, I admitted. And then you gave me a reason not to be. She met my eyes and for once didn't look away. The next few weeks were quiet, but not still. We worked side by side, not as mother and daughter, but as reluctant co-founders picking through the rubble. Every day, she sat with me in the villa's underground chamber, learning the nodes she'd once tried to hijack. Every night, we argued, sometimes softly, sometimes like thunder, about strategy, ethics, markets, power. But beneath the friction, something new grew. Not trust yet, but understanding. The kind you build brick by brick, not in a courtroom but over breakfast, during shared silences, in the spaces between questions. And then the threat arrived. It started with a message from Adrian. No greeting, no pleasantries, just 2 words. They're moving. A consortium of foreign investors, the same group Celeste had nearly signed with, had filed a joint claim at the International Trade Council. They argued that my reversal of the Alpine Reservoir deal constituted economic sabotage. They wanted damages, euros 19 billion, and they weren't bluffing. Felix called an emergency meeting in the villa. The air in the study felt tight, like the room itself knew what was coming. They're not just suing, he said, pacing. They're lobbying governments. They've hired PR firms in London and Dubai. They're painting you as a protectionist relic holding back global progress. Of course they are, I muttered. That's what wolves do when you take the carcass away. Celeste spoke up. They'll come after me too. I was in those meetings. They'll say I misled them. You did, Felix said bluntly. She didn't flinch. Then I'll own it. I looked at her, really looked. There it was, the steel I'd given her, but finally pointed in the right direction. We built a counteroffensive. Celeste used her media instincts to pivot the narrative. She went live on every major news channel. Our water isn't for sale, it never was. The Alpine reservoirs belong to the people who drink from them, not the shareholders who have never seen them. The world wasn't ready for that. They were expecting the Iron Heiress to play victim. Instead, she sided with me, on record, in front of billions. Meanwhile, I prepared the legal strike. Using the original environmental sovereignty agreements Adrian and I signed decades ago, I invoked Article 12, a clause that recognized natural water reserves as non-transferable heritage resources. It was archaic, but it had never been repealed. The investors hadn't counted on someone old enough to remember where the bodies and the documents were buried. The trade council hearings were brutal. They flew in economists, lobbyists, even a former EU commissioner to testify against us. But for every slick argument they made, we had truth and infrastructure, and something else they didn't expect. Celeste and me, standing side by side, not as figureheads on opposite sides of a chessboard, but as a unified front. She spoke about the future, I spoke about the past. She sold vision, I grounded it in science. She disarmed them with charm, I cornered them with clauses. It was almost beautiful. The ruling came at midnight, delivered in a cold, digital voice. The council finds that the Monaco Trust and the Ray's sovereignty clauses are legally binding. The Alpine reservoirs remain under non-transferable heritage protection. The damages claim is dismissed in full. We won, not just legally, symbolically, publicly. The wolves retreated, snarling but defeated. Later that night, Celeste and I sat on the villa's rooftop, barefoot, watching the lights of Monaco scatter across the water like spilled stars. "You know," she said, "if we weren't related, I might actually like working with you." I laughed. "If we weren't related, you'd probably have tried to buy me out." She smirked. "Fair." The silence between us wasn't brittle anymore. It was elastic, capable of holding something. She turned serious. "You're not going to live forever, Mom." "No," I said. "But legacy isn't supposed to be a statue. It's supposed to be a current." She leaned back against the stone railing. "Then let's build the current together." For the first time, I believed her. Months later, a new headline appeared on every major outlet. Mother-daughter duo launched Global Water Equity Initiative. From courtroom rivals to co-architects of the future. The world loves a redemption arc, but this one wasn't for them. It was for us. For the girl who hummed in the marshes. For the woman who almost disappeared. For the promise Adrian and I made long before money learned how to corrupt water. We didn't rebuild the empire. We rewrote it. And this time, we did it together.